Hey, Modern Commerce, welcome back. We're at it again. I'm here with my man, John. We do have a special guest on today's episode, and we will be talking about internet marketing hot takes for 2023. So before we get into introducing our guest, I'm going to bring in my guy, my co-host, my partner in crime, John the Mon Coyle.
Pew, 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 pew. What's up, man?
Good
to be here. Good to be live. Good to be doing a daytime episode. We had some nighttime vibes in the last one.
Yeah, man. It's good to switch it up, you know?
Yeah. How you doing? You doing good?
Doing quite all right. Fine, I would say.
Fine. All right. Okay. People are like, get to it now. All right.
How about yourself? I mean, we can wait a couple
also
more.
well. I'm well, thank you.
Nice. All right. Now that we've got the courtesies out of the way.
Yes. Cool. So excited about today's guest. I did not call this episode Internet Marketing Hot Takes for no reason, because today we have the often controversial, often spicy, always hot Mr. Barry Hott from Hottgrowth, which is the coolest name for a company ever, by the way.
It's the hottest name. How many times do I have to tell you, John? It's not cool.
It's not cool. Hot. It is hot. Yes, that is my bad. 100%. Cool, Barry. How are you doing? Good to have you with us, man.
Doing well. Thanks for having me. Glad to have you in the DMs. And then look, now we're talking minutes later, seemingly.
Yes, minutes later. Backstory here. I had like a guest fall through. That's actually a lie. I did not book a guest for today.
Wait, is that true?
Yeah, I really didn't book a guest for today.
That's great.
And I was like, we're supposed to record a podcast today. And so then I lied to Barry and told him my guest fell through and asked if he could fill in last minute. And he was like, yeah, I'm in. I'm available during this time. And here we are.
I would like to become a side gig as like professional last minute podcast guest.
Like, hey, you're not going to schedule me, but like, hey, if you need someone in a pinch, I'm your guy.
I just want to be a utility man on every podcast roster. Just throw me in. No prep needed. I'll just come in and I will perform.
Yeah, I'll say some stuff. That's for sure.
I'll say some stuff. It might be bad, but yeah, you're stuck.
That's not important. That's not important. Cool. Well, let's talk some hot takes. Sure. We're gonna talk forward. We're gonna kind of frame this as like a looking forward to 2023 conversation. But I think a lot of the stuff we talked about off camera anyway, it's pretty universal, pretty timeless. You know, so whenever you're watching this, these takes are still hot.
2028.
And we're really actually going with some stuff that is a little against the grain in terms of like maybe not like the common like conventional wisdom you'll hear even on D2C Twitter. So
isn't that what a hot take is? Did you just explain what a hot take is?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, in case they didn't know, or in case they were like, well, what's a hot take, right? Like, what is it with two T's? A hot take is just the same as a hot take, but it's when Barry Hott does it. So
yeah, it's contrarian.
Yes, contrarian, if you will. So number one, this is kind of the one you're famous for.
Yeah,
is make ugly ads right there.
That's right.
On the hat. Make ugly ads. Do you want to like you want to do a little read for the hat? Like,
sure.
Make ugly ads. Buy a make ugly ads hat. It's only $3,000.
It's $4,000. Makeugly.com. Go get your make ugly ads gear. You can get a hat like this. It's basically a $5,000 hat marked down to $4,000. It's $1,000 off. You can get a $10,000 hoodie for $6,000. What a steal! But really, make ugly ads is all about making ads, not the ugliest ad that you can. It's about making ads that are the uglier version. Take the uglier option, the uglier route than what you natively think is going to do better. That's what every marketer is like. Oh, we got to make it pretty. We got to polish it up. We got to like make it perfect. Which
on
is like
brand.
Only what marketers think. It's not just on brand. You're totally right. But it's beyond that. It's like, okay, how do we frame this perfectly? How do we make this look exactly right? But you know what people are watching on Instagram and Facebook and TikTok? Not perfectly shot stuff. They're looking at stuff that their friends are making, and they're looking at viral content. And like viral content, like I just watched, did you guys see that like baby or young kid that was like dancing in like a snow jacket? And like, then it's like dancing like this. And then like people recreated that video and did it like side by side. And it's like adults doing it next. Yeah. And like, none of that is shot in a studio with perfect cameras and lighting and all that. Like that's what people want to see. So find the way to make stuff that looks more like that, is more believable, is more authentic. And the spiciest take that I'll give about Make Ugly Ads is that every brand can and should make ugly ads. I don't care how premium or luxurious of a brand it is. You can make things. If you're going to make an ad for Facebook or Instagram or TikTok, you can and should make an uglier version of that ad, shot on a phone instead of a red camera, or, shot, as a selfie instead of shot like
imperfectly.
Any other way. There's ways that you can make it look and feel more appropriate for those platforms. And it still makes sense for those big luxury brands.
Instagram's a really interesting platform because there's a lot of really good looking amateur photography on there. Sure. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Right. So and that's like a very niche thing. And kind of what you're saying is, and I've heard it this way too, is like stand out by like blend in, but stand out.
Yeah.
The way you stand out in a very bad way is when somebody's scrolling through their feed and I'm seeing stuff that my friends have posted and it's within this range of like pretty, right? Like, or professional, let's say, right? Like it's anywhere from like, not very to like, kind of like, decent looking amateur photography or whatever. And then something comes up that is out like over here, like outside of that range.
Yeah.
And is like more professional.
Exactly.
It just stands out right away. It's like ad right away. You know what I mean? It like triggers that ad red flag before you've even had a chance to like hook them.
Yeah.
Their ad red flags already up and scroll past. A great example that I'll give you is if you're ever scrolling through your feed and a trailer, like a movie trailer comes up. It's like so obvious so quickly before the trailer even starts, or like that it's like, oh, this is different, right? Like this is another level.
Yeah.
So that's what you're saying. But I will let me give you the pushback that I could imagine happening. What if you're Rolex?
Yeah. Yeah. This is the conversation I have with so many people. I've had this talk with like Raba on the Adtopsy, which and a shout out to Adtopsy, my YouTube show with Fire Team. I'll shout out so many people on this show.
They didn't pay for that spot, but that's okay. No. I'll let it slide.
Yeah. He said he basically asked the same thing. And I think, if you're Rolex and you're making an ad that's going to be on Instagram, I absolutely think you should be thinking about how that's shot and what that is. You can still make the product look incredible and make people want to buy it in a way that is organic visually to that platform, right? Those are not like completely separate things. Those are not unrelated. You can make a beautiful ad, but shoot it in a way that belongs on TikTok, belongs on Instagram, right? It doesn't.
Yeah.
And it can also be shot. It can be someone talking about it. It can be someone wearing it. It can be someone like, it just doesn't have to be that TV ad.
It doesn't have to be what you'd put in a magazine.
It does not. And I'd say more so, it doesn't have to be what you put on TV. Either of those. What's hilarious to me is both of those probably get more creative budget than they would put towards social, because they're basically just saying, oh, well, we already shot this. We already paid a bunch of money to this agency. The agency can just repurpose it. And they just do that because they're afraid to put anything uglier than that in market. Like no one in that ecosystem is going to be comfortable doing that for most of those brands.
Yep. Our guy, Shad Lambert. Yep. You got it. And it's exactly what we said, right? Like when you're scrolling and you're used to seeing this level of beauty and you see something that's outside, or like on the other side of that too, it's like off-putting. You just move right past it.
Yeah.
Casey, I know you have thoughts on this one. Let me ask you this. Why is it, especially D2C brands that like aren't huge already, still feel this need to like make all of their ads beautiful?
Ooh.
Like it's one thing if you're already huge, because
that's a great
here's the thing.
point.
If you're Nike, you're going to get away with anything.
Right.
You know what I mean? Your ads are going to work no matter what. They could work better, but they're going to work just fine. And you won't know the difference because you'll have just made them beautiful. But like there's brands that aren't huge already that need their ads to work as good as they possibly will. And they're like so averse to this. Why?
Yeah, I think that there's a stage that's pretty normal for a lot of D2C brands, where, and it's not true about every brand, but you kind of go through a little bit of a playing marketing phase, at least for the kind of scenarios you're talking about here.
Marketing.
Not everybody, right? But it's like the worst case scenario, right? We've definitely seen it before, at least.
Oh yeah.
And you start, we've talked before about the importance of like an internal brand champion, the people who kind of understand your avatars on kind of a different level, probably because they are one of those avatars themselves. So yeah, it stands to reason they kind of know what somebody wants to see, but you can miss the forest through the trees on that altogether, where you start like thinking like, hey, our spectrum of things we want to release are like this. And we've talked about it before, where I will take the whole field versus just this any day of the week, because you are bound to be missing some angles, some designs, things that could be working that you're just not even willing to try and test out and get data back on, because it somehow infringes on that internal value you see the brand. And I mean, we just had BFCM. I mean, I think it's pretty par for the course that, if you don't have an insane budget to create new creatives, it's pretty par for the course to like take like a sales banner, put it over an existing creative and launch it as a new creative, right? And there are some brands who are like, no, we don't like that. That doesn't feel right to us. I'm like, you don't want people to know about your sale? Like, they're like, no, it's more like we know what that creative is supposed to look like, and it's not supposed to have that. I'm like, some of the people don't know. It's like that's a weird way to look at it from my point of view. Or even like I've had the scenario where brands will call some internal like branding person will be like, hey, I don't really like how that creative like director call to action like stands out so much. Like, can we make it like blend in, like go a little bit better? I'm like, you don't want your call to action to stand out. Like, what are we talking about here? Like, I mean, I think I'm the wrong person for your team, honestly. Like, that's what I do here.
Yeah, that's anyway, the main thing that we want the call to action to do is stand out. Yeah,
well, I brought a visual. That's the answer.
That's exactly what it is. Exactly. Ego. And it's not necessarily like ego in a negative sense where they think, like they honestly think they're making the right decision. It's not just like, hey, my brand is cool and I need to make sure it looks cool all the time. They really believe that's what performance marketing is.
I do. Yes. For the most part, I think they do think they're making the right decision, but I also think people rationalize it. Incentives drive actions is my belief for the most part. There's like a few people I've ever met that do not act in accordance with their incentives, and they're the strangest people. Like, I don't know how to interact with them. But like incentives drive actions for the most part, and then people rationalize, right? Like people rationalize taking the action that really is aligned with their incentives. So in Elon Musk, he'd make them ugly but effective. Yes, Felix.
I gotta get him the hat. Yeah.
Little interruption here from Felix dropping a comment. If Elon Musk did creatives, he'd make them ugly but effective. Right. Like, it's just that focus on effectiveness over aesthetic. But kind of what I was saying is, I think that a lot of times internal creative directors, brand directors, visual designer, whatever their title is, what are they incentivized to do? Really, they're incentivized to like keep their job, and the way they keep their job is by seeming necessary when sometimes they aren't as necessary as they'd like to seem. And so so they kind of like handcuff a performance agency, or like they are like, oh yeah, this agency like really needs a lot of hand holding to get the aesthetic of our brand right. When it's like, we don't really, we're just trying to make stuff that is more effective. And so, but then it gets rationalized into like, I'm making the right decision, I'm protecting our brand, I'm doing that. And that's maybe worst case scenario. Maybe it's not always like that, but I do believe incentives drive actions, and oftentimes in-person or in-house people, the main thing they're incentivized to do, if they're salaried, is like, just keep your job, try and get a raise, right?
That's most people by far, like in this industry, most people. And like, that's kind of funny when I think about like where we, talking on D2C Twitter and in a lot of these spaces, like this is the group of people who are often not.
Right. Most people aren't there. Yep.
Right. Most people in this industry are not even close to it. And even then, a lot of people in there are still like kind of just learning all this and stealing all this information just to like keep their jobs,
Right.
So, I don't know which is worse, the guys that are doing it just to keep their jobs, or the guys that are doing it to
protect a brand,
just to sell a course of everything I said, even though they don't understand it. So I don't know.
Yep.
But go ahead. Yeah.
I was going to say, I don't mean to be insulting when I say that people are playing at marketing. But I guess what I mean is like anybody, it's worth like trying to keep your job, trying to do a good job. It's okay to have different perspectives. But my particular stance on it is if you're not actively looking at data, are you really making informed decisions? And is that really marketing at that point? It's more like just imagery in general. Like it's kind of like art at that point, really.
It's just it's pretty subjective. Yeah.
Right. Which gives you no footing when you're trying to work as a team. If everybody's got these like subjective goalposts they're trying to hit, you're like, I mean, what are we working towards? I don't know.
Okay. True. Let's move on to hot take number 2.
Mm-hmm.
This one is yours, Barry. What your attribution says is not tied to the reality of what your actual ad dollars are doing.
Totally.
Explain that.
Absolutely. So one of my favorite things is there's a weird, for me, like if you're following me, you might think of like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Like there's a bit of like almost hypocriticalness where I am such an advocate for one-day click attribution. So hardcore about it in terms of like optimization settings in Facebook.
Yeah.
But I think there are people that when they hear that and they see that, they misinterpret that for me thinking that what that is real and true. Like I'm just saying that's me making a decision for a system to better optimize because I want more data. I want more conversions to be forced to be happening as soon as possible so that I can learn from that and optimize from that and understand the ads that are making people take the most immediate actions now. But by no means do I think that 1-day click or even 7-day click is telling the true accurate story of the customer journey.
Yeah.
Like there are people that have been seeing ads from the same brand on Facebook for weeks or months, and they can only get attributed to like a 1-day click or 7-day click goal, right? Audience or ad set, whatever. And that we take that for meaning like it does this. And it's just, there's such a bigger ecosystem happening, especially with bigger and bigger brands who are advertising on more places. Like it's just insane to even think that these attribution windows are real or based in reality.
Yeah.
But I still do wholly believe that you should be making the system get you as many conversions you can quickly. And that way it helps you understand one ad is better at getting conversions today than the other. That means that to me, that ad is better at getting attention and better at changing people's minds than the other ad, which has a bigger lasting, I would also say a bigger lasting brand impact even. So I'll stop there.
This is actually one of the harder things to explain to brand owners and like people who haven't spent a lot of time doing media buying. So I'll give an example of it. For example, let's say your like new customer cost per acquisition target blended is $30, right? Like you want to get new customers for $30. And let's say I use a Facebook 1-day click window or Northbeam 1-day click or a Triple Whale 1-day click CAC or clicks, whatever, I'm essentially looking things on like kind of a 1-day click window, or a tight click window. And it says that as a whole channel, Facebook is giving us an $80 CAC.
Right.
What you're saying is Facebook as a like that is not a reflection of what Facebook is doing as a channel. The reason we're looking at it on 1-day click in Facebook is so we can look at Facebook and say which ad is giving us $60 and which ad is giving us $90. Like what is better relative to just that channel, so we can say which ads in Facebook are better, right? We're not saying that window is actually reflective of Facebook's performance and Facebook is like way underperforming and we should cut it, right? Because it's at an $80 CAC. And that's actually like the most common scenario is that interruptive channels like Facebook, TikTok, YouTube will show like a really high CAC on tight windows. But I agree, because the reason you want to look at it on those tight windows is because it's just removing variables, right? If I'm looking at it on a 1-day click window in Facebook, I'm removing the windows of like, I'm removing the doubt of like, okay, well, this ad does a better job, converting right away, but this ad drives more conversions later. But I don't know, this other thing happened later. Maybe this ad's like reaching people who are further down the funnel. Like there's just too many extra variables. Like what ad does best right away? Those are the ads we want to move forward with on Facebook, but we're not saying that that's what Facebook is actually doing. Facebook is creating way more downstream effect, or YouTube is creating way more downstream effect.
Exactly.
I agree. It's like one of the harder concepts to explain to people who haven't done a ton of media buying.
Especially going back to what Casey said right before we entered this, like we have data that tells us these stories and tells us these things. But a lot of what we're talking about is like being contrarian to that data. Like I have to be like, yeah, we have data that says this ad was better. But then when I go and look at, now that I have like the new attribution setting window breakdown available, I can be like, oh, it was mostly 1-day view conversions, not 1-day click conversions. So are those really valid and helpful?
Yeah.
Ooh, I don't think so.
Yeah. View through is really hard to like optimize around.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Right. And so is click. But like, I agree with you, but so is click. Like even when you use North Beaver, Triple L, or Rockerbox, whatever, right? Like those are skewed also, because there's no way to really know, like, especially when you add in like print media or like out of home, like it's absolutely insane to think about attribution in that way. And it's so hard.
You can't nail it down. And that's what no attribution tool will actually give you a true, like, that channel is contributing that exactly. Like it's all relative, Yeah.
And all this is kind of with the like bullet point that we're all media buyers, and we kind of all understand this on a certain level better than a lot of people who aren't buying media, like you originally said, John. And it's sometimes it doesn't, like sometimes it won't come off the way we want to sound to clients if we're trying to explain these like deeper concepts about how attribution isn't perfect, right? And we can create narratives that look better on us as a media buying agency or as a media buyer for a brand. Or we could also do just, there's a difference between trying to tell a brand what they need to hear and what they want to hear.
Yeah.
And a good media buyer should tell you what you need to hear. But again, it's like incentivizing actions. Like, why would I do that if that could potentially mean like bad news for me? So it behooves you as like a brand owner or a brand manager to like, investigate these kinds of things for yourself.
Dead on. Yeah, Felix said the thing that he commented, the thing that is the best performer one week could be the worst performer the next week attribution wise. And I think that's especially true when you're mixing in like longer attribution windows, view throughs, anything modeled, that kind of thing. It's just like it swings so much more, and it's harder to make decisions and know what to do next. And to your point, Casey, I'll be the first to admit that there are some brands, clients that I've worked with where they just would not understand this concept that we're talking about right now, that like what this says on a 1-day click window isn't actually reflective of the channel. I'm just using it to optimize. So like we had two different windows. We had the internal thing where we'd be like, we're looking at 1-day click internally and optimizing. And then we're using some other kind of attribution tool or window or modeled data or something like that when we show the client, so that we can essentially, without having to fight with the client every time we talk to them, do what we know is best for them.
Yeah.
And that's tough. And that's why we're trying to unpack this, so that, hopefully this is a little clip that we can take and send to people and they get it, right? Anything else here, Barry?
Yeah. You said a few minutes ago, like that people that what did you say? Like people that do things against their incentives don't make sense to you, right? Like, isn't this kind of that though? Because that's most, I see so many marketers, I could say most, but I don't know if that's true. They do the thing that makes them the most money, full stop. Yeah. And that often is not the thing that does the right by the business that they're serving. So many agencies, they're just like doing whatever they can to make the numbers that they use look good, just to play the game right, just because that's what they're incentivized to do. But a real partner, right? And that's the modern, like I see this more and more, is like the term growth partner, like that's on my website, is, not just trying to game a system of metrics, but trying to do whatever it takes to make the business improve. But again, I work with so many different size businesses, and it goes to that concept of incentives. So few people are incentivized properly to solve the bigger problems like, and especially this whole agency and whatever ecosphere, we're often incentivized by like spending more. So it doesn't behoove me to point out, hey, wait a second. If we do this, we're going to spend less, but do it more efficiently. Like it doesn't benefit anyone. So
I mean, I yeah, for sure. I could add a hot take in here that most brand owners are misincentivizing their agencies. They're incentivizing their agencies to do something that's not the best thing for their brand.
Yeah.
And most of the agencies are doing exactly what they're incentivized to do. Which is not the best thing for the brand. And so yeah, I mean, if you're incentivizing your agency around the wrong metrics, or if you're incentivizing your agency to be basically motivated just to keep you as a client, like that's the main way that they're incentivized. That that's what they're going to do, right?
Well, that's what most agencies are going to do anyway. Just
right. And yeah. So then what? Like, then what do you do? Okay, well, I'll look at the relationship through that frame. Like, okay, so you're just never really gonna have a relationship of trust. Like, why don't you just both incentivize around what's best for the business? Is my opinion. But most brands don't want to do that.
It's hard. Well. It's hard when that has to change sometimes, because a lot of these are built with the best intentions, and then it's like, oh crap, we don't want to just scale. Yeah. The incentive has to change. Like the metric that we're using has to shift from Facebook ROAS to whatever third-party system ROAS to maybe it's actually this just other number, like this other metric and this other scale for performance. Maybe it's something that's more qualitative than quantitative. It becomes really weird. And it's the desire to nail down specific metrics is what kind of fuels it to be everyone believing so heavily in the metrics. So it's weird for someone like me to be like, well, the metrics aren't really right.
We're going down a rabbit hole of like, I could go deep into the well of like agency and brand incentivization and what we're talking about are some really, really big flaws in the agency business model and some really, really big flaws in like brand owner mindsets.
Yeah.
I actually think we've discussed sorry to talk over you there, Barry. No, I actually think we've discussed a lot of those types of things that you're probably not wanting to dive deep into right now, John, on I believe it's the value of a marketer episode that we did a few months back. So if anybody's curious, that's a decent one if this topic in particular you want to dive further into.
After the live, we can link it up here.
Yeah.
I'll shout out 2 previous episodes. Your Charlie Disruptor one, he kind of talked a little bit about this as well. And I also just watched your like Perfect Gene one, and I think they kind of a little bit also touched on.
They do. They like incentivize correctly. Yeah,
they did. Yeah, they did talk about that. Right. You also did. I'll plug myself. You shouted out and they shouted out Thesis and the creative that they were doing, and I was formerly there, so I will graciously, humbly accept that on behalf of Thesis, where I no longer work. But I did help grow that team.
Nice.
So many guests come on and they're like, oh, I love your show. I've seen every episode. I'm like, but you actually mention episodes and talk about what happened in them. I'm like, I actually believe you.
I watched 1.5 and I cited them there.
My assumption is that's more than most guests actually watch before
watch it all. My favorite thing is when guests come on and they're like, I love you guys' show. I watch every episode. Casey, it's nice to who are you? Like he's on every episode, so you clearly haven't watched it. You just follow me on Twitter.
Next podcast I guessed on, I'm definitely gonna come on and say, where am I? Who are you? Who are
you? I thought this was a Zoom meeting.
What do you do again?
Yeah. What do you do? Cool. Hot take number 3 is mine. Sorry, I put the 2 T's on there. That's on me. It really should only have 1 T since it is not your hot take. It is my hot take.
You can send me a royalty check on this one.
Yes, I will. Yep. Okay. Hot take number 3 is, I think, one you're maybe going to debate me on a little bit, but I'll say the controversial version of it out loud. All Facebook advertising is pretty much retargeting. Barry.
I love this point and where it's coming from. Genuinely, right? I also hate it, and to my core, we disagree with it. But like, you're right fundamentally in so much in that, like, especially with bigger brands. Yeah. Like people have seen, going back to what I said before, people have seen the ads dozens of times, probably, so none of it's really cold prospecting sometimes. Yeah. But I I don't really care.
Yeah.
I think this changes from what I said earlier when we were talking about this. I don't care. What I care about is I don't care about this whole idea of prospecting versus retargeting anymore.
Yeah.
I just don't care. I just want to make the best ads that I can that will get the most people as efficiently as I can to pay attention, give a shit. Am I allowed to curse here? Who knows? Give a shit.
Yep.
And then take the action that I want them to. And if I make a great ad, it's going to work for someone who's never heard of me before today, and it's going to work with someone who's heard of me 20 times before today. It doesn't matter. It's going to change their perception and the intent, and that's my goal, is to change that perception, change their intent.
Yeah,
that's what I care about.
This is what I'll clarify this statement. All Facebook advertising is pretty much retargeting, is the statement. Here is what I mean by this. What I mean is that it's all audience based. So like you, I don't necessarily think on the continuum of prospecting, cold audiences, warm audiences, hot audiences in terms of who's heard of me. Like, obviously I know about that and think about it a little bit, but like I more think about where are they on what level of intent do they have? Right. Like, have they never, do they not even think about the problem that my product solves?
Right.
Or are they problem aware, but they don't know that there's a solution? Or are they solution aware? Are they aware of my solution? Right. That's what I mean by this, is that I think it's really hard on Facebook using the purchase objective to reach people who are not even problem aware. Really, really hard on using the purchase objective. And maybe
and this is where we disagree. This is where we disagree. So you're saying you'd rather optimize for another action?
No, I'm not saying I'd rather optimize for another action. I'm saying when you're using the purchase objective, you're rarely reaching people who aren't even aware of the problem that your product solves. Usually they're at least problem aware, probably solution aware. Maybe they're not aware of your solution yet, which in many people would say, well, then they're prospecting if they've never heard of your brand. Right. And that's why it's like, yeah, technically, yes, you can prospect on Facebook, but because of like how advanced the algorithm is, I think most people who get ads for whatever your product is are the kind of people who are already kind of in market and thinking about buying stuff like your product or similar to your product, or maybe direct competitors to your product.
Sure.
And this is, I'll qualify it this way too. This is 90% of spend for 90% of brands. There are some ads in some brands sometimes where it's like the ad very intentionally reaches up to people who are only problem aware or like not even problem aware.
Sure. I think even this is too linear of a way to look at it. Like I've brought multiple brands to market, like optimizing for purchase. And I know that they're showing ads to net new people. I know that because it was our primary, channel. So I don't have a problem with that. Like, I know that if I spend more, it will reach more people, even optimized for purchase. It'll just do so less and less and less efficiently. To less and less and less like relevant, likely to buy people. So in that way, yes, you're somewhat accurate, or maybe wholly accurate, that it's going more after people that are more or less, like aware of the problem. But I don't think of it as aware. I think of it as just likelihood to buy, because all of these products and services that people are selling are so different. Some of these are like problems that people never knew that they had. Right. And you were saying that, and like some of these are problems that people know that they have. And some of these are products that they know exist, but they didn't know about this brand. There's just so many gray areas there. I broadly can't co-sign this one. Yeah. But I also can't say that you're fundamentally wrong.
I think it's at a high level of scale. So my observation is that as you scale using the purchase objective, it gets harder and harder to force Facebook to go up the tree. I'm going to use the low hanging fruit kind of thing. So like, Facebook starts with that low hanging fruit, people most likely to buy, right?
Yes.
As you scale with the purchase objective, it gets harder and harder 100%. To force Facebook to go up the tree. They just like 100%. Keep circling the wagons.
This is a huge problem.
Yes, likely to buy people.
The biggest problem facing the modern like Facebook advertiser. Absolutely. Like, great call out. on this, and I do agree. And it's really frustrating, right? Like I work with like Harry's razors, right?
Yeah.
Like they're advertising in a lot of places.
Yeah.
You know, who doesn't know about Harry's razors? And like also this separate issue, you can buy Harry's online through my ad, or you can go to buy it in Target.
Yeah.
You know, like that is you can't track that if they go to Target.
No.
So
yeah,
I agree with you, because they're advertising so many places, because they're such a big brand. We've made it almost impossible for, while optimizing for purchase and not really using visitor or engager exclusions, which the new Advantage Shopping Plus campaigns don't have that.
Don't use.
So they're effectively just going after, like you said, the lowest hanging fruit. Hugely problematic.
Yeah.
Because it's not getting any, if it's not in, the whole system is not incentivized to get any incremental conversions at all. So
right. And go after like,
it just goes after people that are already familiar, already aware. So in that way, I agree with a bigger brand at scale, hugely problematic. Smaller brands, newer brands, I don't think have this problem as much at scale. And it's so uncomfortable for marketers and brands to understand when that, I can't say it's a switch that flips from that, but like it's really hard to comprehend how like you can do all these things. You can be a small brand doing 7-day click, 1-day view, doing lots of interest targeting, and like things will be working, but you start to scale up and all of it kind of shifts and the things start to break down and you don't understand why or how or what to do. And it's because the system is starting to cheat and just go after that lowest hanging fruit, like you said.
Yeah. And it just keeps circling the wagons. Casey, anything to add here?
Yeah, I think that just like any good framework, the kind of like tofu, mofu, bofu kind of setup or prospecting, whatever you want to call it, I think it's got a lot of merit to it in a lot of situations. I do think that it's something that is kind of taken sometimes too royally, is just like the only way to think about how like your ad strategies. And kind of to Barry's point, like I just don't think that's the case for everybody, or at least like there's diminishing returns at a certain point, like thinking too strictly about that stuff. As like a creative strategist, that's my role on a media buying team. I deal with some of this stuff too, where like some frameworks will pop up that are so powerful and so helpful to enough brands to where everybody wants to adopt them, right? And then all of a sudden I find myself just kind of like following certain processes that are already laid out, and I'm like, hey, isn't the first word of my job title like creative? Like, shouldn't I like venture to be creative every once in a while? And I think that's a similar thing with like a media buyer with this kind of framework that we're talking about. It can become so concrete, whether it's the media buyer or the brand, whoever is kind of pushing for that kind of structure, that you sometimes miss the forest through the trees. Again, to Barry's point, sometimes you end up looking, you're trying to deal with problems that are 100 miles away still, and you just need to focus on the things that are right in front of your face. So
Okay, moving on. I think we'll take only a second on this one, because I don't know if either of us would really like give this advice to most people, but we were talking about it a little bit off camera. So hot take number 4, optimizing for purchase isn't the only way. Do you want the first word here?
No.
Okay. Here's my take on this. 90, 95, 98% of the time, I'm pretty much just gonna advise people to optimize for purchase.
Okay.
If they're running, Facebook ads, Google ads, that kind of thing, right?
Yes.
Here's what I mean from a bigger picture standpoint. Number one, optimizing for purchase in your total marketing strategy isn't the only way, right? So for example, if you're breaking into podcast advertising, out of home, TV, billboards, it's not really that optimized for purchase. It is optimized to like get eyeballs of people who you're like really going to have a hard time reaching with Instagram ads, Facebook ads, YouTube ads, TikTok ads, that kind of thing, right? Like they're just different people, or having those same people see it in different spots. And it's tough to optimize it for purchase because a lot of people are consuming that in a manner and location where they're just not going to purchase, right? And I think it's valid. And at scale, I would say it's like really valid, because I think Josh Snow from Snow Teeth Whitening was on here, and one of the things he said that I loved is that he's like, at a certain point, you kind of outgrow the algorithms, where it's like it gets harder to continue growth curve using just digital. And I tend to agree with that. At that same point, I think you can open up growth on those digital channels by optimizing for engagement type objectives. If you're creating engagement type content, right? So if you're creating like a podcast, your brand has a podcast, right? And you optimize for views or view through or engagement or something like that. If you're creating true engagement type content, I think you can bring new people, new eyeballs into the brand, optimizing for engagement type objectives. And with brands where we've had a hard time continuing to scale and reach new people on digital channels, it has been a bit of a breakthrough, because it's like, look, the thing's only targeting warm anyway. Let's just bring more new people into the warm pools, right?
Could you have a good example you can share?
So specifically, there's a clothing brand, a clothing brand. I won't say too much more because a lot of people probably know I've worked on this brand, where they probably around 40, when they were doing about 40 million, 50 million on site on D2C on their like Shopify store. So not including what they were doing in retail, and spending, I don't know, $1 million a month, something like that. It got really hard to, like, our frequencies would be high. We turned over ads often, and it got really hard to like get that much more scale and drive any more incremental sales out of our digital channels. And it was almost to the point where it's like, I rarely recommend this, but it was almost to the point where I could say, if we turned off digital, if we turned off Facebook and Google and we just ran email and SMS, I don't know if our sales would change for years. Like it might be multiple years before we feel that effect, right? Like that's how little like additional new eyeballs we're getting from these channels. So yeah, we just started to focus on a little bit more like storytelling, backstory, founder story focused content, and run it for views. We also started running opt-in. So that's, I think, the best jump to make if you're an e-commerce brand is go from purchase to opt-in. And don't run like some cheesy giveaway, like run like a true opt-in, like, hey, we're doing a product launch or we're doing something like that. It gets a new kind of person, maybe who's not in that like purchase pool. And yeah, so we started running a lot of opt-in content, and we started running a lot of like video view and engagement content, to specifically video view and engagement stuff. The opt-in content was for product drops. And yeah, and like created a big breakthrough for us on digital and like got a lot of net new eyeballs. And we also ran ads to their Facebook group. Like we ran ads that clicked through to their Facebook group.
Yeah, now you're getting in the world of community. That's an interesting separate good play to capture an audience.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. I know like Ash at Obvious had good success. I don't know about ads for groups, but like their Facebook group is supposedly huge. So like that's pretty rad. That is not my area of expertise, honestly. Like I'll admit. Go ahead. Sorry.
There's been a couple times, and Casey can call one out too, where we've realized that something the brand does really well is incubate. Does that make sense? Like, if you bring new eyeballs to this brand, they're very good at incubating those eyeballs and endearing people to them as a brand.
Yeah.
And so then we'll kind of shift the paid media strategy from like, let's drive purchases and let's focus on product to like, let's just get these people new eyeballs because they're good at incubating them.
Got it. So I think I can get on board with this. The main thing for me is like, I don't actually know how much I care about specifically optimizing for purchase for everything. But my point is, if your goal is to get people to purchase, then optimize for purchase. Yeah. Right. Whatever your goal is, make sure you're optimizing for that specifically. If you have some other action and high intent action that you know is a positive signal for your brand, like, yeah, go ahead and optimize for that. I'm aligned. But like add to cart, I don't know if that's it.
Do that.
I will say this though. Here's the thing I'll give away. Like, this is like, I only usually tell this to my like consulting clients. If you are the only time I do recommend not optimizing for purchase when you are e-com is maybe in your creative testing. If you can get higher intent purchase, you can get like add to cart or initiate checkout data quicker with spending less money on your creative tests. If you have a lot of creative to test, then you might be able to pick winners quicker. This does become a little awkward with the event prioritization.
Yeah.
It used to be easier because you could optimize for purchase and then just look at add to cart or checkout initiated and then just, call it a day.
Right.
That's what I used to do. But now you can't anymore because someone who's purchasing, you're not getting that and add to cart or initiate checkout data.
Yes.
So those fields are wrong. But I do recommend that a little bit, especially if your like ratio of available creative to creative testing dollars is skewed. That is the only time I do recommend like, hey, maybe go after that. And that can work. And that can also go after other audiences, maybe a little bit cheaper.
Yeah. So this leads me to our next point, actually, because it's signal data, but I think that where we make mistakes is taking signal data and at best assuming that it's a stronger signal than it really is. So this was your hot take.
Mm-hmm.
We can't really be totally scientific.
Yeah,
like as marketers, we like to think of ourselves as like scientists. And I've said on the show before, like, be a scientist.
Yeah.
Which I do stand by as a statement.
Yeah.
But your point is really good here is that we can't be totally scientific. If you do something like what you just said and you optimize for add to cart in your creative testing, you've just created a lot of uncontrolled variables where you can say, hey, we have some reason to believe that this is the best performing creative and that this should be in a sense graduated.
Right.
But that's definitely not like it's not for sure at all. Like inconclusive.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like this is what we like DM'd a little bit about is like the difference between be a scientist and think like a scientist, I think is hi Dara.
Hey, Dara.
Excited. Oh, so excited she's watching.
Yes.
Dara, the biggest YouTube
talking
star
about thesis. You missed us talking about thesis, but that's all right.
Shout it out. I took credit for all of her work. Actually, screw it. Dara's taking credit for my work.
It was all you.
She's not here to respond, so I can say whatever I want. But like, the think like a scientist rather than be a scientist. Like you can't just tell someone to be a scientist. You got to say like, think like a scientist, which is like ask questions, make detailed observations, develop a hypothesis, find answers using tests and question your answers. That's so important. But it's like when marketers think that they're scientists is when it becomes troublesome because the data we're using is so just wrong and tainted as we've said so much in this podcast already, but also in that we're doing this now on optimized platforms. So any variable between A and B is not just being tracked as like, okay, it's the person like people are reacting differently to this. No, it's the system is driving these ads to younger or older users, people in the North versus the South, the East versus the West, people on Instagram versus Facebook, Reels versus Stories versus Feed. All of these variables, it's quicksand. It's unsteady ground. And the data that we get back from it is not scientific at all. So we need to be really careful with that.
Yeah, I think we talk about being scientific quite a bit on this show. We want to have that mindset. And all the stuff you said there totally makes sense. Another thing I would add to it is like being ultra intentional. When there's so many things that can water down the results to the test you're trying to put out there and stuff, like sometimes it really means just like dialing in to like one specific thing and setting up those controls super tight, and just really being intentional about what it is you're testing. So that way, exactly what you're going to do with any result you do get. Because a lot of times you don't get results, you get wishy-washy results that don't indicate anything. But if you set up tests in the right way and you get a certain type of result, that should indicate like, I need to go do this next.
People who get wishy-washy tests were not intentional with their setups.
I have a problem with people that are too rigid with their setups. I can't stand when, I had a situation where the client desperately wanted to know, did a product pairing, showing the product with food work better than showing the product with people? And then it was like specifically like showing it with like tacos and like with a cowboy, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, okay.
What about tacos and a cowboy?
Well, no, that's a separate. Yeah, we could do that. We should do
another
that, right?
test.
We should do that. But I was like, we can test. I'm going to air quote the shit out of this. We can test that, but we're not testing shit. because the variables are in how it's shot, how it's framed, how it's perceived, anything about it, the lighting, the colors, everything is what's actually at stake here. So unless we're testing, okay, maybe we can test a batch of 15 tacos versus 15 cowboys in different shots and all different things, and maybe we'll get a learning there. But in reality, I don't think we will. We'll get one winner that will randomly win because some part of it was like looked more like a phallus than the others. Like that's what happens on the ads. It's not scientific, it's random, and we are putting too much scientific meaning behind a lot of this.
I'll speak for you here a little bit, Casey. When we say intention, there's a difference. When we say intentional, be intentional, we don't mean be rigid. Right. So
sorry, that wasn't me fired up at you guys.
No. It's
fired
it's
up
a good point. So when we set up a test, right, when we're like, okay, well, we want to be as scientific as possible. We want to control as many variables as we can. But because there's already this huge uncontrolled variable of machine learning over time, right? And machine learning updates over time. We oftentimes intentionally decide not to control certain variables, but we still know what our next move is based on what happens.
Yeah.
Right. So I have a problem with like people setting something up. And oftentimes like mega optimistic people do this. They just are like, it's going to work. You know what I mean? And then we're going to scale it. And they don't even know what it means to scale it, but they're like, it's going to work super well. And we're just going to throw a bunch of budget at it.
I think every ad's going to fail. And then I'm like, I hope not.
Right. Yeah. But then what they get back oftentimes is one of them something kind of might work, but it's a little inconclusive. A bunch of stuff didn't work very well. One thing does work pretty well. And they don't really know what to do with that. Like, what do I do with that? You know what I mean? And that's what we mean by being intentional, is that when you set up a test, if you're not controlling every variable, be intentional about the ones you're not controlling. No, and be like, hey, we're not controlling this variable on purpose because of this, right? And understand what you're going to do next based on like what happens. If you don't, then it's like, like, I don't know, what do you do? What are you even looking for? Right? Like you probably just are thinking like, oh, it's just going to like take off. And it's like, that's just like not a great way to approach the whole process. Right.
Yeah. I mean, look, I agree. You have to have hypotheses and thoughts and whatever. And that's an important thing. But I think the think like a scientist part that's important about it is to continuously really question the results. Cause like, that's what I don't see enough of. And I'm not saying you guys, do this or don't, but like, I see often that intentionality isn't necessarily the problem. It's the observation part that is what becomes a problem. It's like, oh, what's working? Like we all have seen it. We've all done it too. Like, what's working here? It's this headline in the top. That's what it was, that variable. And meanwhile, like maybe it was something about that, but not for the reason we think it was. It's not. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
I'll add a sub bullet to this hot take and say, I honestly think the biggest variable in making ads work is like, does it do something that the machine learning likes, which is unclear to us. Does it do something that the machine learning likes within the first like 1,000 impressions?
It's not about the machine learning. It's about the users. The users like it in the first,
Well, okay. So does it give the machine learning a signal that the users like it sometime within the first 1,000 impressions?
Right. Oh,
and we don't even like fully know what that, because like sometimes it's like we can't really fully even like.
It's based on attention. It's based on attention and like whatever feedback parameters. So generally,
and those feedback primaries switch and shift, right? Like that's the definition of machine learning, is that it continuously learns.
Right. But from what I see, my general understanding, both based on what I see at scale on tons of accounts, and also like from watching the Netflix movie thing, the Social Dilemma, I think it was.
Oh gosh.
Like
we could do a whole episode on that.
Yeah, right. The system's definitely doing this based on attention. The more if you have an ad even if it's not getting clicks yet, even if it's not getting conversions yet, it has no basic data. Facebook is generally optimizing based on attention.
Yeah.
That's my understanding. I see that based on either watch times or just my understanding. That's I could be totally wrong. but it's definitely a metric that it's using, and it's something that we can't really see or know as advertisers. They're not going to make available to us, but that's generally my expectation. So like, there are times where I do think, even though I am very much a guy who will say to almost everyone, like, trust the system, let it prioritize and allocate. I do think there are times where if you have ads that haven't gotten haven't got a little bit of spend, like taking those out and letting them get their own, forcing spend to them can be valuable. But usually it's a pretty bad sign if they're comparatively not getting that.
Something within the first few impressions gave the machine the signal that like this isn't as good.
It happens.
Yep. Cool. Last one, hot take number 6. If something works once, it will totally work again every time, 100% of the time. No, that's the opposite of that is the hot take. If something works once, doesn't mean it will work again. This one seems obvious, but the reason I'm going to call this one out is because of the Twitter thread case study monsters and the agency case studies. And I mean, I feel like we're just shitting on agencies today, but or just like this desire to create systems and processes so that we can just repeat results, right? Especially if we work in agencies. And the truth is, like, one of the biggest things I learned when I went to structured was, like, I thought like, oh, I'm going to get visibility across so many more brands, so much more spend. I'm going to have like this really high level viewpoint of like what's working and what's not. All it did, if like I was like truly like seeking truth and some kind of statistical significance and data significance, all it did was tell me that like there's nothing that's really that universal. Like almost, you know, like something might work in one account and it might even work in 2. And as soon as it works in 2 is about the time you see Twitter threads on it, maybe, you know, or case studies on it, or agencies say we have a framework for apparel, right? And the truth is, like, there was just nothing that was that universal across like multiple brands. Like what worked over here didn't really work over here, or what worked over here, it was like, well, there's a very clear reason it works for that brand and some other brand can't really do it because they don't have that reason, you know?
I hate seeing those fail. I guess I do hate seeing those fail. I do think that within a brand, like,
that's a good point.
I would expect, like, I'm just to be clear, I'm usually not one of those people who's like, don't touch the ad. Don't touch the best performing ad. Never touch it. I'm like, no, if it's your best performing ad, you can recreate that ad. It'll almost always do well, unless it's like sitting there with like thousands of positive comments and like, you know,
it's a safer bet.
But like, if it's a good ad, it's a good ad, and it's a good ad, it's a good ad, you know? But you can't just expect to replicate success across things. But I am all for stealing components and playing with them. I love to look at what Dr. Squatch is doing in their ad account and just try and break down their hypotheses. Like, I don't think that everything they're doing is like pure solid gold, but the thought and the hypotheses I see behind it, like I've watched them make fake Twitter handles or Instagram handles to like frame their existing creative. And I'm like, that's fun. And like, it makes it look like a meme. So I've tried that and I've had that fail miserably and I've had some success. I've had some success doing that. And I now have a better understanding of what bits about that can work and can't work. The fundamental of just doing it doesn't work. But the fundamental of doing certain things in those parameters absolutely can work. But it's about finessing it and sticking with it. And trying to break down and understand what about this is working from a user perspective, a content perspective, not from an advertiser perspective. That's what I think you can replicate a little bit, but it's still really hard.
Yeah, I mean, a great example is like long form content, long form video, Harmon Brothers style ads. Just because, like, if for the most part, like, you got to be a certain size before that's really going to work for you. And the reason it works at a certain size is because you've already seen a lot of diminishing returns over a lot of your creatives at a certain size. And all that really does is it doesn't give you better CPAs. it brings more people, more eyeballs into your brand more effectively, right? And oftentimes gives you worse CPAs. But now I'm making a sweeping generalization again, but it's kind of what I'm saying is just like, yeah, I don't know. I just have not seen a lot of stuff replicate super cleanly from one brand to the next. And so far as we have had 2 brands that sell like really similar products, like direct competitors of each other. I mean, think like, I don't know, okay, this
Coke
isn't
and
it.
Pepsi.
Coke and Pepsi.
Yeah, that kind of thing. Right. Yeah. Think that kind of thing.
It sounds like a conflict of interest, but okay, go on.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And so in like one of them we'll make an ad that's just a banger.
Yeah.
We make the exact same ad for the other one. And it doesn't really work that well.
Yeah. I've been there too. I've worked at an agency where we had Toyota and Honda at the same time. We had whatever. But I want to go back. The Harmon Brothers thing you called out is interesting. Harmon Brothers stuff hard to recreate, although like some agencies kind of do. But also like it's almost 2023. It's about to be 2023. Do you believe that a Harmon Brothers, by the way, their ads are amazing. I worked at BedJet, which we had a Harmon Brothers video. It was very cool, a Shark Tank product. Do you think that a Harmon Brothers video, long form 2-3 minute video, is a good tool to have in 2023?
So case study, because you can't replicate things across brands. That's the whole point. Always, but case study. I work with a brand currently who did one from a different agency that I won't name because they didn't pay for the spot, but a different agency, and it is a good tool for them. They already were going to do about 10 million this year. Okay,
let me ask you that.
It gives them a bump.
Where is that being used? Is that being used on Facebook?
Yeah. So collection ad units. And so think for an apparel brand, right? Like if you're using Dabba's, what are those called now? Advantage Plus Shopping or whatever. Yeah. Dabba, like, let's just stay strong. If you're using Dabba's, you should be testing collection ad units. And if you're using collection ad units and they're working, it works pretty well with like a long form. And that was all like, so that signal was all already there. So the hypothesis was this will work well with a long.
I might need to see an example of that. Let's maybe follow up. I want to better understand what you're talking about, because I don't think that's a good ad format for Facebook, Instagram, or TikTok. They've probably come up with better ways to make those work, but a lot of that goes against the whole make ugly ads. Although they do some things to uglify their ads.
That's exactly right. They do some stuff to uglify it, make it native to platform. And it's good. And we use it in like post form too, right? It was during Black Friday. I ran that ad with Black Friday copy, outperformed all of our Black Friday ads, outperformed all of our evergreens. So and then also have run it to like as a test to our core landing page as well. And it's like, across the board, thumb stop rate, hold rate, click through rate, conversion rate, CAC, like a good performer.
Nice.
So a good, but not like, it's not like Purple that's going to scale there. Like, so the agencies pitch you it on like, and we're going to like, they paid a lot. They paid 6 figures more than 6 figures for it.
I'm familiar. I've been in those.
And it like they give you these case studies of like this brand scaled by this much, and Collar, is a good example of one that uses them as well. And like, like you're not going to get that for the most part. I'm not seeing that, but it is a better performing ad than many of their other ads. Yeah,
that's fair. I haven't been involved in something that has like that kind of like 2-3 minute Harmon Brothers style thing, which I think are amazing.
Yeah.
It's been a while since I've had access to an account that has one of those going. But when I had, it was hard to beat. But I just wonder if now they sniff in that ad zone a little bit, or do they do such a good job in their hook of presenting a problem? That's what makes it those Harmon Brothers style ads, whoever's doing them, but like, let's say Harmon Brothers, right? They hook really good, and then they do an angle and they rehook, and it's it's like an old school infomercial.
I do think it has a lot to do. Like I've worked with another brand where it was a flop, one of their worst performers, and like subjectively, I thought that one was less funny than this one is. So that probably has something to do with it,
Yeah.
You know, that's a risk you run, actually, I think, with that style of content. But what's great about it is that if it is funny, or even if it does just have a good hook, which those should, that's kind of part of the recipe, is like a strong hook.
Yeah.
One of the things that can be overlooked about that type of asset, being as long as it is with as many different cuts, is it's always, you're usually able to like break it down into pieces and reorganize it. So if you find that there's that drop off rate at a certain point, I mean, you can just shorten it a lot of times, like pull out like 1 or 2 key cuts, and all of a sudden it's 20 seconds shorter, and it's not as big of a time investment that people are sensing when they sniff the ad out, you know, because I think that's what scares people off. You sniff an ad and it's not like you hate it. If it's something you want, you're like, or something you're interested in, you don't mind watching it. But when you realize, like, I'm not watching 4 minutes of this thing, that's what turns people off.
Who's got that time? Yeah. Cool. Well, Barry, thank you so much for coming. It was great having you. Thanks for hopping on last minute. And yeah, I mean, Casey, say the YouTube stuff. Take us out, man.
Modern Commerce, thank you for tuning in to this episode of the podcast. Barry, thank you for joining us. John, thank you for setting up this interview as always. Guys, if you liked the interview, please go ahead and hit that like button down below. Also, comment down below. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this episode. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. That'll signal to YouTube that you enjoy our content, and YouTube will pitch it to people most similar to you. So with that, Modern Commerce, until next time, we'll see you.